All right, good. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for taking time out on such short notice. Uh, we've had another two steel investigations kick off last week, both of them on cold rolled steel, and there's both an anti-dumping and a safeguard application. Now, we decided to do this as a webinar because we've just a couple of weeks ago had the big steel review finalized, and we saw at the end of that review largely fairly significant duty increases. That, by the way, is still not entirely over. We saw some rebates created, but the drive towards driving up duties in the steel sector continues to move forward. Now, before we get into the detail of this case, for those of you who don't know, I'm just going to take a minute to explain what each of these are, because there's an overlap between the two cases. So let me explain what an anti-dumping, I'm sure most of you know what it is, what a safeguard is, and who needs to concern themselves with what. So a safeguard deals with a sudden unexpected surge in imports that is causing or threatening to cause serious injury to the domestic industry, which in this case is effectively ArcelorMittal. Welcome to those from ArcelorMittal who are here. I do see a few of you snuck in. Also welcome to those from the DTIC. Now, ArcelorMittal brought two cases, and this is becoming the norm, but it's quite unusual to have both of these brought at the same time. The effect would be that the duties would likely be compounded on top of each other. So a safeguard says there's been a sudden, significant, unanticipated surge that threatens or has caused serious injury to the domestic industry. And then the duty to be imposed for a safeguard is as large as it needs to be to offset the injury effect. Safeguards, by their nature, are temporary measures. In fact, technically, what they are is a temporary breaching of your WTO commitments. So South Africa said we will cap the import duties at 10% for steel. And then what the safeguard does is it says, well, for a short period, not really that short, 3-year period, you can breach those commitments. And that is essentially what is going to happen here. If the safeguard duty is imposed, it'll go in place, like I said, for 3 years. At the end of each year, it has to reduce, but the scale of the reduction can be quite small. And at the end of 3 years, it is meant to terminate. They can request an extension, and effectively the duty can go all the way up to a final effect of 9 or 10 years. I need to double check that. So the consequences of this are potentially quite significant. I'll come back to what can be done about it. The second part of the case is an anti-dumping action. This is exclusively against China, and it is on a much smaller subset of product, but it is an overlapping set of product with the safeguard. And here the allegation is that there are producers in China who are selling into the Saku region at a price lower than what they sell locally in China. And that's literally the definition of dumping. If that dumping then causes or threatens to cause material injury to the domestic industry, in this case ArcelorMittal, then the anti-dumping duty can be imposed. That duty, to start with, if no one opposes the case, will go in at the requested level. If it is opposed, and particularly if there are local producers in China that oppose it and provide all of the required data, then that margin of dumping will be calculated specific to each company that properly cooperates. And so the end result of an anti-dumping case can be that you have different producers in China with different margins of dumping. And then what is called the residual rate, or an all others rate, which is everyone who didn't properly participate will then get usually a higher duty than those who did participate. So let's go through the scope of all of this. The scope, the tariff codes on the left, you don't have to concern yourself too much with the details of what they are, but those are cold rolled steel. And on the right are the anti-dumping codes. And you can see on the left, if it has an asterisk next to it, it overlaps with the anti-dumping tariff codes. And the period of investigation runs up until the end of last year, so to December 2025. And so in the anti-dumping, well, in fact, start with the safeguard, my apologies. In the safeguard investigation, the requested position at the moment is 40%, and it covers around 3 billion rands worth of imports brought in by around 54 companies. You have, unless you get an extension, until the 30th of July to file initial sets of arguments. That 40% will or whatever the final number ends up being, will be applied against all countries except for those with very tiny exports to South Africa and except for those who are less developed countries. So, Togo in Africa is going to be exempted, but Togo in Africa probably doesn't produce cold rolled steel. So think of it practically as covering the whole world. Trade agreements have no effect here, which means if you import your cold rolled steel out of Sweden, which is in the EU, you are still going to get hit with the duty. So the trade agreements provide no protection here. And if we simply have a look at the import trend, the bar chart is volume and the orange line is the average unit price. There's certainly something worth considering here. So, does this warrant a safeguard is a different issue, but there certainly has been a fairly significant increase in the import volumes, as we can see. Then to the anti-dumping case, they've requested 119% against China. And they're just shy of R1 billion that was imported under the 4 codes that are covered. Most of that imported by 36 importers. Here, you have until the 7th of August to respond unless you get an extension. This includes the producers in China, the importers in South Africa, and very importantly for both cases, probably the most important part in the safeguard case is for users of the product to participate. So it is not only a question of, for example, a large steel merchant to respond. Their clients and whatever they do with the cold rolled steel, make a car, whatever else it might be, it's very important for them to actively participate. In the anti-dumping case, anti-dumping cases are almost never won without the producer in China's cooperation. So it is not good enough to have an agent participate. We have to get all the way back to the factory. South Africa has a unique way of doing anti-dumping cases against China. So the Chinese producers are going to be in for a material amount of work. So time becomes a really, really significant factor. On the 4 products that overlap, again, there certainly has been an increase in volume and a drop in price. So this doesn't mean the case is won, but it does mean they were not, the case is not utterly irrational. I'm going to stop blabbing on for a moment and just take a breath and see if there are any questions. If not, I've got a few more things to say, but let's kind of deal with any questions that might arise. All right. Is there anyone with questions, Nadia?
Talana has a question. She raised her hand. You can just unmute.
How's it, Talana? Talana, you're muted. No. Talana's not talking. Anyone else, Nadia, or is that the only hand up at the moment?
That's the only hand up at the moment, and we have no questions in the Q&A. Oh, Robert has also raised his hand.
Van der Kooi. Hello, yes. Robert.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, how's it, Robert?
Oh, on yourself, Donald.
Yeah, good.
I've just got a question. will the safeguard duties be imposed on all types of cold rolled steel? So why I'm asking this is we currently import certain quality of steel from Europe. And there's only one supplier which is in Europe that can manufacture that type of steel. So I just feel it's very it's just wrong to put it on all cold rolled steel if ArcelorMittal or any of the other steel manufacturers cannot produce these types of quality steel. Yeah, that's basically the question.
Okay, that's an important question. So, Robert, as part of the submission, we would need to argue for your particular product to be exempted. That can happen, and it has happened in other safeguards. So certainly that is not impossible. The starting point is that what you see in the Gazette is what will attract a safeguard. In order for it not to cover your product, a special set of arguments would need to be put together. But the answer is yes. Theoretically, I don't know anything about your product, but theoretically you can be exempted, and it has happened for other products.
Because it would actually be great if it's not first implemented and then we have to go to SARS to get a rebate code created, yes. And then we ask for safeguard duty permits, etc., rebate permits, etc. So if it can be, it would be great.
I mean, obviously the objective is to get it all to happen at the same time, but you've been around long enough to know that sometimes things derail a little bit.
Yeah, okay. Thanks a lot.
But yes, sure, you're welcome. Talana, your hand is still up, or is that just a plea for help? I'm not sure. Anyone else?
Donald, there is a question from an anonymous attendee. Should I read it?
Yes, please.
Are there many automotive grades that are affected by the anti-dumping duties, or is it just the safeguard duties that cover the automotive grades?
Ooh, the answer there is I don't know offhand. I don't know. If Anonymous can contact us, that's a question we can answer, but I don't have the answer while I am sitting here. So I don't know.
We've got another hand from Anton.
Hello, Anton.
Hi, Donald. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Donald, can you just publish the codes again? Because I missed the very first part. So I would just like to see those codes.
There we go. By the way, at the end of this, Nadia will send out a copy of the recording, the PowerPoint slide, and perhaps you guys can just include the 2 gazettes as well, Nadia, when it goes out.
That'll be great. Thanks very much.
Of course. Anything else, or are we giving everyone their afternoon back? Oh, anonymous new question. Are there likely to be provisional anti-dumping duties? Yes, I'd be very surprised, Anonymous, if there were not provisional duties. Let me perhaps just explain how soon you can expect it to arrive and how it will be calculated and so on. So ITAC is legally not allowed to impose provisional duties within 60 days of the case initiating. So for the first 2 months, you're 100% safe, nothing can go in. Now, what will happen is submissions will be made by importers and exporters, but for purposes of the provisional, it's really the exporters that matter. So let's say there are 3 exporters that respond. The submissions go in, ITAC reviews them, and they raise deficiencies. There is a 7-day calendar day deadline, an unextendable 7 days for them to fix up whatever the deficiencies are. Let's say one of them fixes up all of the deficiencies. What ITAC would then do is they would travel to China, they would verify that producer, and let's say that producer, they come back and they say that producer has a 10% margin of dumping. and the other two missed the deadline, then we will see a provisional duty imposed of 10% on the one company that cooperated and got verified, and we'll see 119% imposed on everyone else. Now, how long will that be? Well, that's difficult to say because it's dependent on the number of companies that respond. The more companies that respond, the longer it is going to take for the duties to be imposed, because ITAC have to work through everything. And on steel, these responses are big and complicated. So it's going to take a while. My guess would be, and no one can hold me to this, would be probably 6 months or thereabouts. Now, if all of the companies are found to be deficient, then of course the provisional duties can happen quicker. If some of them are okay and need to be verified, it'll take a little bit longer to see the duties come in. Once the provisional duties come in, they will remain in place for 6 months. Now, an anti-dumping investigation by law has to complete within 18 months of initiation, and if it doesn't complete, the case will automatically terminate. And so if the provisional duties, let's say they come in after 6 months, they can remain in place for 6 months, so that takes us to a year. ITAC have to wrap the case up within those 18 months. If they wrap it up within before the 6 months have expired on the provisional duty, then whatever provisional duties were paid will effectively be converted to final duties. And if it is, if the provisional duties expire, you will get your money back. They can still impose a final duty, but you would have had your refund. So that's kind of broadly how it works. Nadia, when you send out the email a bit later today, please also include our guide to anti-dumping for everyone to have a look at. The guide will answer lots of questions that you might have forgotten to ask while you are here. To the tariff code issue that Anton asked, Annika, can you just double check that while this continues? Are there any other questions? I did see another hand go up. Look, Talana, I'm very worried. We might need to send someone over to you because that hand does not go down. All right, anyone else? All right.
There is another anonymous question. Oh, well,
yes, they have not imposed provisional duties on the Galv AZ codes. I believe this is because the automotive sector was worried about their grades being affected. There's also yet to be a provisional duty on color coil, assuming the Chinese mills are fighting their cases here. Look, I can't say with certainty that they're not obliged to impose a provisional duty, but it's becoming increasingly unusual for them not to. Now, to the comments on the automotive, yes, that could have been the reason. I don't know. The team on our side that worked on those cases are unfortunately not on this call, so I can't even ask them the question. But my take on this is you need to plan for the worst, which is you are going to have a provisional duty. Obviously, nothing stops us arguing for why there shouldn't be one. But from a planning perspective, you need to plan for it. One other thing on provisional duties, and in fact, all duties imposed in an anti-dumping case, they are effective from the date that they are imposed. You will not get early notice, which means your date of clearance will determine whether you pay the duty or not. You are not going to be given an opportunity beforehand to be told, listen, if your goods are on the water at the moment, we're going to put the duty in 2 weeks' time. So a way to cleverly manage that risk is to make sure that you clear when your goods are on the final stage of the journey. But the reality is if you get caught with it, you are going to have to pay and there's nothing you can really do about it. Arusha. You're muted.
Hi, Donald. Can you hear me?
How's it? Yeah, I can hear you. How's it?
Okay, so I just wanted to find out, there's obviously a very short time that we've given to respond to the safeguard and the anti-dumping, being the 30th of July and the 7th of August.
Yes.
Do we expect that there will be an extension, or will it just go into provisional duties and then later on be adjusted, within the 18-month period?
So extensions are dealt with by company, not per investigation. So Arusha, you have to apply for an extension in the name of your company. You have to give motivations for it, etc. And then you will or will not be granted an extension. For both cases, you can be given an extension of up to 2 weeks, not more than that. So the reality is you should be able to get an extension if you apply and you motivate it properly, but it is not guaranteed. And if you need help with that, then obviously just give us a call and we'd be happy to guide you through it. Yeah. Oh, by the way, just something else here, particularly on the safeguard. The deadline deals with an initial submission. Nothing prevents you adding information afterwards, but you have to get an initial submission in, or you will not be allowed to add to it afterwards. So, that first submission becomes incredibly important. With things like a safeguard, it really does make sense to work as a consortium because there's no individual treatment given to different companies. So we will certainly be putting together a consortium to do a response. It would make sense in the safeguard to work with others. With the anti-dumping case, a consortium would make sense on the injury arguments because injury affects everyone equally. But on the dumping allegation, the individual companies that imported and their producers need to do their own responses. Does that answer your question, Arusha?
Yes, 100%. Thanks, Donald.
Good. How's it, Kim?
Hi, Donald. My question just goes back to, I thought there was going to be a change. We know we've got the hot roll duties that have come in. And now they looks like they're moving to the cold rolled, and then we're going to see the galv, and then we're going to see the color. But this Gazette now is telling me they're moving on the cold rolled. But I thought there was going to be more a change around, right, we've got the safeguarding duties in on hot rolled, and the rest of the basket really to try and manage that through import permits. Basically having permits and trying to control the volume of imports coming in through permits, by each company really being granted an allocation that they could import. Where are they standing with that thought process?
Okay, that's a very good point. So safeguards, the default in South Africa is a safeguard takes the form of a duty, which is what has happened here. But it doesn't have to take the form of a duty. It can also take the form of a quota. So they can allow a certain volume to come in, and they can then allocate that volume to different companies. We can get into how those allocations will work, but typically it's based on historical volumes. So the bigger importers in the past will usually be given a bigger allocation and so on. So that is still a possibility, Kim.
Mm-hmm. Donald, sorry,
Yeah.
How would that then impact, say, for example, that we're talking about provisional duties coming in, and that could be anywhere between 2 and 6 months for these provisional duties to come in.
Yes.
Should we be trying to motivate as a company for a quota, as opposed to, guys, in the past, we've been importing X amount of tons. Instead of levying these provisional duties on us, which is the 119% or whatever, we should be allowed to, within our quota, granted a provisional quota. Is that not a?
Yes.
Is that not an option?
Yes, it is. It is. It isn't what was requested, but it certainly can be put forward. There's a trade-off with all of these things. I mean, the challenge with any sort of let's maybe explain how it would work. So the quota it'll be what's called actually a tariff rate quota, which means within the quota, you will not pay the safeguard duty. If it then blows out of the quota, you would. So that could be one way to do it. It can also be an absolute quota. In other words, it says we only going to allow, I'm just picking a number here, we're going to allow 1,000 tons in a year, and that's it. And when you've hit the 1,000 tons, you can't import anymore. That would be another option. But yes, Kim, South Africa's never imposed a quota as part of a safeguard, but it's common elsewhere in the world, and the provisions are in our legislation to do it.
Okay. Thanks.
Whether it's a good idea, I don't know. I'd have to think about it here. These things, there is a trade-off here, particularly if you are not one of the lucky people to get the quota. Then it becomes a really big problem as to how you get the material. So let's have a chat about that, but legally it can be done.
Yeah, because I mean, this is what could very well be happening. There's still, I mean, there's very few large service centers or like the big steel traders. Those are kind of diminished. But now you still have your mid-tier steel traders. I mean, if they eat up the allocation in quotas, they're going to have a significant advantage against someone who is now just manufacturing and maybe using smaller volumes. So the whole allocation of this quota, if they're going to allow so many thousand tons out of China, and it's whoever's going to get in there first to grab a percentage of the total, I'd imagine that could start getting quite messy.
Yes. So usually what happens is that there will be a set of rules published, whether at the provisional or the final stage, but there'll be a set of rules that says this is how the quota is distributed. I don't know what those rules would be. And like I said, Kim, I hadn't even thought about that here. So let me think about it and we can talk again. But you've got a couple of challenges. The one is this year, if you go to ITAC's website and you download their annual performance plan, you will see in there, they say that they want to start considering your BEE rating when issuing permit. Now, what exactly that means, I have no idea, and it's not explicit in their document. But the concern I have is just a complete nightmare scenario where rather than what you need, your quota allocation suddenly starts being determined by what your BEE rating is, or how long it takes. When in the queue do you get your permit? You're up or down the queue depending on your rating. So I'm not suggesting that will happen here. I'm just saying they've got a very vague comment in this year's annual performance plan, and we must just bear that in mind.
Oh my goodness, I wish you didn't have a hand there, but like a teary face, because I'll put that up. I'm finished, Donald. Okay.
Yeah, okay. But can I buy you a whiskey? Yeah. Whiskey is for everyone, Nadia. Anyone else? Okay, Anonymous asks, what do you anticipate is the chances of safeguards not being imposed given the data used for the investigation? We're simply not in a position to answer that. We received the documents just a minute ago, so it's going to take us a while to even work through these applications. So I can't comment at the moment on how strong or weak either case is. All right, can I ask if any of you want to have meetings with us, then just let us know. We're very happy to schedule meetings. I understand people might not want to talk here. So just to quickly summarize the things you need to prioritize. First, on the anti-dumping case, you have to talk to your producer in China. That is really, really important. Secondly, if you are an importer yourself, you want to look at whether, you want to look at making a response as an importer. Importantly, if you're impacted by the safeguards or the anti-dumping case, the user of the product, the people that make something out of the cold rolled steel, it is important to have their input. And of course, we are happy to participate, help any of you that need help, talk to your suppliers if they need help. please be in touch, but also be aware of the deadlines. Don't leave this for too long.